In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make your pictures and videos go from looking like this to something like this. And the only thing that changed here was my lighting. Effective lighting will not only brighten your scene, but it also creates depth by shaping your subject with highlights and shadows. And for this reason, lighting can be one of the most obvious differences between an amateur and a professional content creator. This video will break down everything from the very basics on to the more complicated stuff. So no tips or top 10 lists, just clear information for beginners that will help you to learn exactly what you need to know. All right, so let's jump into the tutorial. Lighting can be broken down into 5 different attributes: type, position, brightness, color, and quality. Let's start with the first attribute, which is the type of lighting. And there are 2 main types of lights, which are strobe and continuous. Strobe lighting produces a flash or a burst of light for a very short period of time. Continuous lighting produces constant light without ever turning off. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Strobe lighting is usually smaller, it's cheaper, and it's much more powerful than constant lighting. And because the flash is for such a short period of time, strobe lights are usually better at freezing action, or if you use longer exposure times, you can produce creative effects using motion. Now, on the other hand, strobe lighting can be more difficult to learn because there's no immediate way to see the changes as you make them. You may have to spend more money on wireless equipment in order to synchronize multiple flashes at the same time, and some cheaper strobes will take a long time to recharge after the flash, which is also known as a high recycle time. Now, when it comes to continuous lighting, there's much less of a learning curve and there's no recycle time because, as you can see here, I'm using continuous lighting. What you see is what you get. Continuous lighting does not require any type of radio equipment either, and it can also be used for both photography and video production, whereas strobes are only useful in photography. On the other hand, continuous lighting tends to be larger, more expensive, and a lot less powerful than strobe lighting. The bulbs tend to burn out much more quickly because the light is never turned off, and continuous lighting may be fatiguing for your subject, especially if it's positioned directly in front of their face. So now that you understand this, we can move on to the second attribute of lighting, which is position. As I mentioned at the very beginning, effective lighting will create depth by shaping your subject with highlights and shadows. The position of your lighting will influence the direction and the strength of the shadows that you create. Now, a lot of new photographers and video producers are confused by this concept because they see complicated sets with lighting all over the place. But when you break it down, there are only 5 primary lighting patterns that you need to understand, and all of them require a single light. The first lighting pattern is butterfly lighting. You can produce this look by placing your key light directly in front of and above your subject, angled downward. This produces a pronounced shadow directly below the nose, as well as some lighter shadows on both sides of the face. The catch light, or the sparkle in the eyes of your subject, will appear near the top of the iris. Butterfly lighting tends to be used when lighting female subjects because it accentuates the cheekbones and helps to hide wrinkles. Now, the second lighting pattern is known as loop lighting. You can create this look by placing your key light at about a 30-degree angle off to the side of your subject, angled downward. This produces a shadow around the nose that loops down onto the cheek. Most of the face is still lit up, with a small shadow on the outside of the face opposite from the light. And with this lighting pattern, the catch light will shift slightly to the top corner of the iris closest to your lighting source. Loop lighting is flattering to just about every type of subject because it creates depth suited for portraits without introducing more dramatic shadows. Now, if you continue to angle your key light further to the side of your subject at about a 45-degree angle, then you get our third type of lighting pattern, which is known as Rembrandt lighting. This was named after a Dutch artist who frequently used it in his work. Rembrandt lighting is similar to loop lighting, except the nose shadow is much more pronounced and it connects with the shadow on the cheek, producing a triangle of light. With this lighting pattern, the catch light will look very similar to loop lighting, so you'll see it in the top corner of the iris closest to your lighting source. Just like loop lighting, Rembrandt lighting is flattering to just about every type of subject because it creates depth suited for portraits. Now, the fourth lighting pattern is known as split lighting. You can create this look by placing your key light at a 90-degree angle off to the side of your subject. This produces a very dramatic look by splitting the face into light and dark. Now, this is not a standard lighting choice like loop or Rembrandt lighting might be. Split lighting tends to be used for moody portraits because the strong shadows convey a mysterious, high contrast appearance. That strong drop off from light to dark makes this a good choice for black and white portraiture. With split lighting, you may not have a catch light depending on the exact angle of the light. This can add or completely remove the light from your subject. fifth and finally, we have backlighting. You can create this look by placing your key light directly behind your subject to produce an edge of light around them. With backlighting, there is no light in front of your subject and only a silhouette is present. Backlighting can be used in so many different ways. It can add contrast, it can shape your subject, and it can create a strong, powerful look, which is popular when you're shooting athletes. This type of lighting also tends to be popular around sunrise and sunset when the sun ends up being much lower in the sky. Just watch out for loose hairs when you're using this type of lighting because they will stand out, especially on a dark background. So now that you understand these 5 different lighting patterns, you're probably asking, why do photographers and video content creators use so many lights? Why do these sets that I'm seeing look so complicated? The best way to understand this is to use the popular 3-point lighting concept. No matter how many lights you see on a set, they almost always fall under one of 3 categories. They're a key light, they're a fill light, or they're a backlight. A key light is your primary source of light, usually positioned at a 30 to 45 degree angle off to the side of your subject. This is the light with the strongest influence on the look of your scene. All of the lighting patterns that we just went through use a single key light to create the look. Now, a fill light is your secondary source of light, usually positioned on the side of your subject opposite from the key light. This is used to fill in the shadows that are being created by the key light. And there are no hard rules on where exactly your fill light should be placed, but let me share a couple of examples of how you can use it. Remember the butterfly lighting pattern that I showed you? Well, if we add a fill light directly below the key light and angle it upward, or we use a reflector to accomplish the same thing, we end up getting something known as clamshell lighting. This is popular with fashion photographers because it produces an extremely flattering look where the subject appears to glow. Or you remember our split lighting pattern? If you place a fill light directly opposite, or again, use a reflector as a substitute for the fill light, you can reduce the intensity of the shadows that are being created by the key light, again, producing a much softer look. Finally, a backlight is your third source of light, usually positioned behind your subject. The point of this is to define the edges around the subject and separate them from the background. You can see the difference that a backlight makes in this example. The edges around the shoulder and the hairline are much more defined, creating that separation. And the reason why a lot of new photographers and video producers tend to get so confused is because 3-point lighting tends to be more of a guideline. It's not a rule. There are some situations where you might use less than 3 lights, like here I am right now just using 1 key light above me and the backlight's behind me, but no fill. The situation just depends on the subject and the environment, which is why you probably see so many complicated set examples. But at the end of the day, just remember that every light in the scene is almost always a key light, a fill light, or a backlight. So those are the 5 basic lighting patterns and a clear breakdown of how the 3-point lighting concept can help you to position your lighting and affect the look of your shot. But you should keep in mind that the position of your camera and your subject have an effect as well. If the subject is turning toward the light and the brightest part of their face is closer to the camera, this is known as broad lighting. Broad lighting will widen the face and have less contrast overall. If the subject is turning away from the light and the brightest part of their face is further away from the camera, this is known as short lighting. Short lighting will narrow the face and create a more dramatic, high contrast look. If you understand all of this, you can begin to adjust the look of your shot by using our third attribute of lighting, which is brightness. And that's all I've got for you in this tutorial. If you want to see the second part of this tutorial where I cover brightness, color, quality, as well as some of my other tutorials where I break down every single type of lighting modifier and how they can be used to create different looks, you'll have to head over to speedyphotographer.com, the fastest and ultimate online photography school, teaching you everything you need to know about lighting and all the other stuff that goes with it. Last but not least, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more high value content just like this, and I'll see you in the next video.